Mr. Tabi Joda from Global Non-State Actors, and he's going to talk about strengthening local communities, DRR governance, and resilience through 1 billion trees for Africa resilience. Tabi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon and to share with you a simple experience that started in my little community, and it's gradually becoming an ideology that we are spreading right across Africa. $1 billion trees for ecosystem-based DRR strategies for strengthening local communities' resilience and to build the capacities of local communities to be able and to know how to implement the Sendai framework. To whom much is given, much is expected. And from whom much is taken, what should be the next thing? Local communities, sorry, I can't. Is it working? No, I need change. Yeah, next one. Local communities are the most vulnerable to hazards and are the most affected by impacts of disasters. Why are they the most vulnerable? And what are the vulnerabilities? Next one. Here, local communities are the kind of people, or are those people who come from the kind of village or community where I was born or where I was grown up. And these communities live on the foundation of the ecosystem. I think this microphone. These communities live on the foundation of the ecosystems. Yet the ecosystems are rapidly being depleted. They're rapidly losing the viability. And the viability, the loss of this ecosystem viability is creating what is visibly floods, drylands, excessive drylands, deforestation, desertification, and even the visible extreme weather events that are really bearing down not just on African communities, but also across the entire globe. What does it mean for an ecosystem to be lost? The ecosystem constitutes the foundation upon which humanity lies, but most especially, like in Africa, where 80 to 90% of the people are rural agriculturalists or rural farmers whose livelihood depends on the trees, on the tree products, and natural resources. And if these natural resources are depleted, what do you think will be the life of these people who solely depend on this ecosystem? That is the big question. The results is so direct and it's so felt all along, and we know. But most often, this is a neglected area, a neglected truth that disasters should not only be talked about the infrastructure that are available in our cities, but it should be talked most importantly where the critical mass lies. And the critical mass of the world, and the critical mass especially of Africa, is those people in the communities where livelihoods are seriously threatened by flooding, by dry lands, by depletion of the biodiversity. And then, the results now you can see already felt across the globe is rural unemployment, which is becoming a big disaster. Rural employment is driving uncontrolled migration. And many Europeans would tell me that The last migratory movements from Africa was the biggest ever in history, where young people from Africa are migrating from the rural communities because of lack of these jobs, lack of rural employment. They are going into the urban cities where life is even more dangerous, life is even more really, vulnerable. And what happens when they don't get what they dreamt the urban towns would give them? They have to move further, and they want to cross the Mediterranean to be here in Europe. And this catastrophic convergence of these migratory movements resulting from ecosystem losses is also competing with the effects of climate change. And we can't deny the fact that this is a very heavy concern. As much as we are talking about city infrastructure, we should look at where the base of the critical mass's livelihood lies. And that's why I have the project of planting 1 billion trees across Africa. It's such an ambitious project, but because an ambitious project begets an ambitious trouble, an ambitious problem begets an ambitious solution. And by the way, before I go forward, from rural unemployment to uncontrolled migration, you now have other critical challenges like the poverty that is being felt generally very wide across Africa, the food insecurity, the violence, like where I come from in my community presently, it's at war. Because partly for some political reasons, but most importantly, I think there is a serious competition over scarce natural resources. Where do these natural resources come from, and what are these natural resources? Please, next slide. So, back to what I was saying, to ask this question, competition over scarce resources, but then the scarce resources, like in recent times, the cyclone that bore down on the communities in Mozambique was very visibly a big result of an absence of the trees on the ecosystem that existed in that environment. Next one. So what are we doing to reduce disasters and build resilience? Next one. That's the question. Now I'm planting trees. Next one. Next one. You can just see what I'm doing in terms of realizing or implementing the 1 billion trees for Africa. Getting involved, stakeholders, individuals, communities, young people, women, everybody involved in what we think constitutes the solution. Because the solution for so long has stayed on the stages of speeches and the conference documents and reports, not really going down into the community where the impact is felt and where we can create generic, new organic ecosystem drivers that can really reverse this threat, which you all are feeling and we all are feeling at the same time. So these are the engagements at different levels, different multi-stakeholder level to get people engaged. You and I, we are doing the same thing one way, one little way, or the other. And this is me continuing doing that. And you know, foodstuff, food products, tree crops are very, very vital for a thriving ecosystem. That's what I'm doing to plan to implement 1 billion trees. Getting more and more stakeholders involved. Continue. Okay, now. So who is benefiting from this project? From these actions? Next one. How tangible is what I'm doing? How measurable it is? Where is this done? That's a question I'm asking, but I need to give you an answer. And I want to give you a very little example of something that I did, so this could be an answer for your next slide. Good. This is the community. In 2015, you can see, look at the landscape very well, how it looks like here, this undulation, and how dry it is here. The action, some of the actions you have seen with those that were not projected here resulted into what you are seeing now here in 2019, 3 weeks ago. That is to say, what are we doing? To whom are we doing it? And for what reason are we doing it? But most importantly, can we really do it? If this dry land is converted in 4 years into a forested land with a viable biodiversity, a thriving ecosystem, that means the possibility of 1 billion trees is very prospective. That means the possibility of re-engineering a new pattern or new landscape for good livelihoods, for sustainable livelihoods, for reduced disasters, for reduced susceptibilities to the vulnerabilities upon which disasters lie, reducing the inequalities which are created or fueled by disasters, and reducing the poverty that is already so very vast across Africa, that is tearing communities apart and driving young people from their homes into cities, and from cities and into very risky, uncontrolled, and of course reckless migratory processes or journeys through the Mediterranean, where we have over 18,000 who have already died. So this is the solution. Next slide. This is the solution done. Now, as you can see, this is from Google Earth. A zoom over what you just saw now. This is what the landscape has become. This constitutes over 120,000 trees planted here. And the dry land is still very, very bare, and you can see visible here. But gradually, as the days go by, as the months go by, this will eventually be filled, and the degraded landscape will be restored. With more hope, with more work, with more action, next one. And with your involvement, we think what matters is to plant, grow, and nurture trees to improve ecosystem services that produce social and economic opportunities, that improve livelihoods, and that reduce the vulnerabilities upon which disasters lies. But upon that, reducing vulnerabilities is one thing, but to build the capacities of our communities to be able to adapt to climate risk, to climate impact, and of course, to build their capacity to have resilience or to be able to cope extreme disaster effects, it's a very essential thing, and that's what the 1 billion trees for Africa project is actually intended to do or realize at the end of the day, to protect the ecosystem. The question is how. You saw this landscape, or the trees that you saw there, they were protected, but though this is a community that relies on wood fuel for its subsistence, how can you protect these trees from deforestation? How do you protect it from going back into a dry land, because there is a heavy appetite for wood? It is now, the action is to create alternative livelihoods for the communities. You have to create new economies, new opportunities that can help the people to be able to balance between the need for wood as money or wood as income for something else that replaces that need for wood as income. At the end of the day, we can be able to sustain the forest, we can be able to sustain the landscape, the ecosystem. Next one. And so my message is so short. It doesn't matter who you are. Each one of us sitting right down here in this hall has a capacity to do something, albeit differently, that can constitute to the solutions to building resilience, to building the capacities of our communities to adapt to climate change, and of course, to build that resilience that we are talking about, such that we can functionally, as a team, cooperatively deliver on the Sendai framework, on the SDGs, and on the Paris Agreement, but most importantly, restore our humanity that is so gruesomely being affected by our own excessive practices. So that's my message to you. But also, what can we do in the immediate? Let us plant 1 billion trees for Africa. If that makes sense to you, I appeal upon you to join me in this process, because we can do it. If that was done by me, then we all can do 100 or 1 million fold than that. If you love that, then thank you very much. Do you have a question, please?
So any comments? Any? No, I think they are with you already in the 1 billion trees. So, yeah, but there's one question, please. Yeah.
Just I'm asking about the fund for this project. How did you manage the fund for the project?
Funding, yes.
Well, thank you very much. This is a question I really get to encounter most often. People ask, how do I fund this project? But I always ask them, like I gave my message, each one of us has something special. We have the capacity to do something differently for our community that delivers on those solutions that we're looking for. So principally, I fund this project from personal income. It is not funded, it is not supported by nobody, by no organization. But we are looking up to assistance, we are looking up to cooperation, because it's a success in Cameroon, it's going to be a success in Nigeria, it can be a success in Ghana, it can be a success all over Africa. But if the capacity for me to coordinate is enhanced, and this capacity will lie on your cooperation, to lie on your partnership, to lie on also your support. So we will be humbly grateful if you have something to add that will add value to this. Thank you.
We have another question for you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, sir. You touched on a very important issue when you were making this beautiful presentation, the issue of conflict. In your words, if I got it right, you said there is actually war in your place. How do you see this project? How do you see this project, 1 billion trees in Africa, answering the question of conflict in Africa, particularly in your area? And by now, can you say there is a percentage of success in that direction?
Thank you very much for such an awesome question. I think it really helps me buttress more on the value of this project and what, of course, the long term can be in Africa in terms of reducing the vulnerabilities to the fragility of African states, which we all know. And I must say, like I began from the beginning, that the depletion of the ecosystem that constitutes the foundation upon which our livelihood lies, it's a catastrophic of its own, and of course of the biggest scale you can think of. So, to go straight to that, Africa has lost thousands and thousands of kilometers of forest land. The loss of this forest land constitutes a loss of wildlife, constitutes a loss of birth life, constitutes a loss of so many natural organic products or creatures that grow within this forest that, of course, by nature, is food for Africans. The ecological stress of climate change has actually exacerbated that on one side. But if we look at the role of 1 billion trees is to restore this degradation, restore this habitat, restore this ecosystem that have lost so much of their viability. And the loss of this viability creates competition over the remaining scarce, very scarce wildlife, scarce bird life, scarce forest, scarce tree, scarce wood, scarce everything that constitutes the renewable natural resources which constitutes the livelihoods of Africans. So I would say very outrightly, the war that started, or some conflicts that started between Nigeria and Cameroon over Bakassi, were not just a conflagration over fuel. It was a conflagration that came out of the complete depletion of the natural resources of this area. We have this growing in areas like Karamoja in Kenya, in Uganda, Teso and Kasese, and all these places are experiencing very, very violent community clashes. It's resulting from the scarcity of these natural resources. So 1 billion tree is a solution to deliver on the renewability, because the natural resources need to be renewable. How do we renew what we have lost? How do we renew the value we have lost? That's what 1 billion trees is doing. If I answer you very well, sir.
Oh, thank you so much. Can you have a discussion later with him? Because we have another presenter waiting. So
thank you very much. Thank you so much for
much
listening. Thank you so much.